Hello everybody, welcome to episode 1 of our Microsoft mini series. Today we're going to be talking about the impending price rises for Microsoft. My name is Simon Leuty, I'm the founder at Livingstone.
And I'm Gareth Redshaw, I'm the practice director responsible for Microsoft and Cloud within Livingstone.
So obviously it's a 6-episode mini series. We're going to start with episode 1 today, and we want to talk about the price increases that are going to happen in and around March 2022. So Gareth, I've got a number of questions for you around this area because obviously it's going to be quite intriguing for people. What do we know about the impending price rises that are coming?
Oh, that's great starting point, Simon. So in terms of what we know about this already, the price increases, it's not a flat increase across the board. It's very targeted on certain products, but it's more important to highlight where it's not targeted. So we're actually expecting to see price increases on most of the EUC M platforms, possibly a number of the E lines as well, but notably not on M365E5, which is the package really that the vendor would really hope that most people were taking on board.
Why is this happening now, Gareth?
There's lots of different ways of looking at this actually. The first way to look at it is it has been a very long period of time since we've seen any price increases. In my memory of using these technologies, there's not been a price increase for that duration really. So we're talking over 3 years, so 3 to 6 years really for most of them being released to market. So in fairness to the vendor, it is expected that there would be a number of price increases due. I think for me, that is justified considering the amount of additional technology that has come through into some of these platforms. There has been a lot of transformation and evolution of the technology itself. But what I would say is, and what I find to be more interesting is again, where we've not seen the price increases. We've not seen price increases against the E5 components. So for those not familiar, E5 are the more premium packages. It's the one that at the moment Microsoft are trying to gain more market share. They're trying to encourage adoption rates, and for me, I would see that more of an incentive than anything else for those particular components. By the fact there haven't been, it closes the gap between the premium and the standard offerings.
So what does this contextually mean? I suppose you just pointed to it there, but let's expand upon it. What do you think Microsoft's really pushing for in these price increases?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways of looking at it. I mean, in so what it means to our customers, potentially it means that there's arguably a 20% price increase they need to take against some product sets. So that's what it means to them. What does it mean to the market overall? It's really an indicator, really, that Microsoft are moving their focus more towards E5 as what will become more of a standardized platform for their customers, really. It's really technology evolution, the way technology has been adopted, new features, new packages that have been evolved.
Who's this going to impact the most?
That's a good one. So in terms of who impacts you the most, well, obviously, if it's not impacting E5 customers, if you're already on E5 and you're consuming all of those features of E5, you could arguably say that you're not really going to be impacted by that, and you can kind of disregard the price increase. I would actually disagree, and what I would say is that all customers are going to be impacted the most, because if you take a look at what the more obvious impact rate will be, it's those E3 customers that are not ready for E5 yet. They're the ones that inevitably will be taking a 20% price increase just by staying the same. So, yes, they will be impacted arguably the most, but when you look at the E5 customer, if that E5 customer is not really consuming all of that E5 platform, and it would be a consideration to move either all or part of their estate onto an E5 or an E3 or an E3 plus model. When I say plus, I mean components really. That becomes less viable as an option. So you kind of lose that position of leverage that says, I know we're on E5 today, but it's not working out for us. And to actually use that as negotiation leverage, it's not really there in the way that it was. So I'd actually say everybody gets impacted by this, but maybe to a lesser extent if you're already consuming a lot of that E5 component.
And really in practice, very rarely do we make recommendations for a single profile, right? Usually when we're getting into profile management, you might see something up to 5 profiles. So we don't actually see that many just E5s across the board. And sometimes when we do see E5s, we actually do custom profiles to challenge some of those consistent plans and come up with more fit for purpose. I'm thinking, you know, a manufacturing business with knowledge workers and factory workers, these people don't need all the same stuff.
Yeah, you know, actually, that's a really difficult one for me to answer in a way that is easily accepted by a lot of people that probably listen to this, actually. And the reason for that is when we engage with new customers into the team, typically we get told, you know, we can't profile our estate. You know, we're quite a simple organisation. We've only got 2 or 3 different profiles. That's all we need looking forwards. So for people that have got that mindset, they'll probably listen to this. I mean, actually, you don't bother us that. That's fine. We already know what we're doing. The reality is, after we've engaged with clients and we've really applied our knowledge and expertise to look at how they actually consume technology, that profiling exercise that we go through brings out, to your point, you know, it could be 5 or 6 profiles that weren't there previously. That puts the client in a position of being able to reduce the cost by considerable amounts. You've got to remember that the price increases that are coming, you know, the 20%, as much as we're saying it's not on all products, most customers will typically spend 80% of their Microsoft investment against that EUC environment. So, you know, 20% sits across a big part of the expenditure. Profiles, yeah, absolutely, they are important, but most people won't be aware that they can profile their estate to the extent that you'll be more familiar with by looking at some of our outputs and what that looks like. Most people don't start like that.
Mm-hmm. So how can we help? And then how can customers think about trying to mitigate these increases if they're coming up on a new agreement in the next 12 months, let's say?
Yeah, that's a great one. In terms of how we can help, I mean, for me, it's quite simple. It always comes down to planning and preparing for what's about to happen to make sure that you actually understand your estate properly, and you know what you're actually consuming against those premium and standard products as well. I guess you could say, I'm really saying, understand that bill of materials as best you can. That is really what you need to do to be able to sort of plan around this. In terms of mitigation for customers that don't have that knowledge that our team has got to go through them profiles, that's where the big saving comes from, by the way. Just by planning to negotiate nice and early is going to be helpful. You know, beat the increase is maybe the sort of takeaway point there, and actually plan to get the next contract in place ahead of schedule. Not everyone can do that, because you may have an increase 3 months after the renewal where that sounds like a viable approach. It may be 6, it may be 9 months. In which case it really comes down to getting that bill of materials in a much stronger position and being able to really articulate what the impact is to your business, and being able to articulate that back during the negotiation process with a vendor. That's really how you're going to be able to get yourself into a, I'll use the word, better position, rather than a full remediation, because of course that's not possible for most cases.
Of course. So it's really about planning and preparation, which is, really kind of common sense. So let's just talk about some key takeaways here, Gareth. What should people really be thinking about as it relates to these price increases?
Yeah, well, I want to start with that one, actually. Plan ahead. You can't really use hope as a strategy. It's not viable when you've got such a large increase coming down the line. It is a complex renewal. It will be a more complex renewal now than it was when the contract was signed 3 years ago. With the price increases on top of that, you really need to plan ahead in a way that you never have done previously. We'll get into more conversations around the planning ahead and how negotiation tactics have changed. But one sort of sneak preview, what we'll say in that last session that we're doing, is actually that contracts are different now, because you're a little bit stickier than you were 3 years ago. You've bought the product, you're consuming the product. The vendor's going to be less excited about helping you with that renewal because you're already consuming the product. They're not encouraging you to deploy something you're not already doing. So a little bit of a sneak preview there to the last session, but it really goes hand in hand with this, which is planning ahead is really critical. And of course, target early renewal. If you can beat the increases, plan to beat the increases by speaking to the vendor. One of the areas to really think about is the reason why the vendor might want you to actually go ahead and start that negotiation early. You've got to look at it from their perspective. In the last quarter of their financial year, their team are operationally maxed out. They really are. So the fact that the date for this increase is coming when it's coming is no coincidence. It allows the vendor to start offering early renewal incentives so that they can remove that operational overhead from their organisation for a lot of the smaller organisations in particular. So take advantage of that to your benefit with the price increases. Get ahead of the increase and start negotiating early. Don't leave it to last minute. And then, of course, you've got to understand that bill of materials. If you don't know your own bill of materials, that negotiation is going to be driven by the vendor and not by your team. So make sure you really understand what you're actually consuming, and if there's any opportunity in there to actually optimize it as you look forwards as well. And then if you really cannot do any of these things and you really can't plan ahead, I suggest you go and speak to your finance team and ask for more budget, because it's going to cost you more money if you're not careful. I would say that's the last resort option. You should do that anyway, really. Set expectations where they should be. If you need any assistance with prepping and preparing for the increases, if you're going to speak to your reseller, you speak to Microsoft, or even if you want to speak to us, we can give you some guidelines as to what the price increases actually are against some of these components, so you can brief your own finance teams and set expectations on budgets as well.
Fantastic, really insightful, Gareth. So for everybody who's interested in continuing with this mini-series, please subscribe to our series today. What we'll be covering next is Power BI and Power Apps. So we look forward to welcoming you to episode 2, and thank you very much for your time today.